Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions with the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Area Interreligious Ministries in cooperation with KNVA. Join us now for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Carl Gronberg, host of the program. One of the questions that has always been a part of my journey as a person of faith is, how do we experience unity, and how is that unity expressed? For some within the faith community, the baptized community, the Christian community, this is a time when the Holy Eucharist is celebrated, when the priest, the pastor, the clergy person holds up the host in front of the faithful, and then takes the chalice and holds that up. And you've been there, many of you in the Christian community, you know that event. And that gives a sense of oneness with God and oneness with the people around us. The Texas Conference of Churches is one of those organizations, and their executive director, Father George Bithas, who's with us today, is going to talk to us, Father, about how do we experience within the Christian community unity. What is this sense of ecumenism? That's a big word that many of the faithful would say, don't use that kind of church talk. But yeah. What is ecumenism, Father?
Well, first of all, good morning, Carl. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Ecumenism is a word taken from a Greek word that means that it encircles the entire known world. Well, the Christian community does that. It encircles the entire known world. And we, as the family of Christ, need to experience each other. Now, the ecumenical movement, which was another form of that word, really began to take form after World War I and really took its formation after World War II.
Was that first expression of unity after World War I, was that on the international level? Was that where it started?
On the international level.
Okay. Yeah. And what were some of the expressions? Is that the World Council of Churches?
No, they didn't call themselves the World Council of Churches. There were several meetings that dealt with what we call now faith and order. Mm-hmm. And and part of the World Youth Movement of the YMCA and different expressions of how we could get together as a Christian family and experience things together. Mainly prayer, because that's one thing that unites all of us. Mm-hmm. And that prayer community that lends us to understanding each other grew. After World War II, there began to be formation of what we now call the World Council of Churches. Mm-hmm. And various meetings in Evanston, Illinois, in Toronto, in all of these formational meetings came to form the World Council of Churches.
Not all Christian traditions are a part of something called the World Council of Churches. And when we get to talking about the state level, we'll talk about the Texas Conference of Churches, which you are executive director of. But yes, you are a Greek Orthodox priest. Is the Greek Orthodox community a part of the World Council of Churches?
Yes, and has been from its very inception. The Roman Catholic Church is not an official member of the World Council of Churches, but yet they have strong observer status. Mm-hmm. The impetus for the Roman Catholic Church to be strongly involved in the world ecumenical movement came after Vatican II.
Mm-hmm. Which would have been what time?
In the mid-1960s, mm-hmm. With Pope John the 23rd and then Pope Paul. The Roman Catholic Church strongly made overtures to all the other churches. and Roman Catholic theologians and Roman Catholic bishops across not only this country but across the world were involved in conversation with their other Christian brothers and sisters.
You mentioned that one of the places where people of faith within the Christian community find unity is in prayer. Another place would be in what we call the sacrament of the altar or the Eucharist. How are they different? The Greek Orthodox, what would they say about something like the Eucharist? Baptism is another one where we find a sense of unity, but what about the Eucharist? I know Roman Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Protestants have differing views regarding the meal.
Right. For Greek Orthodox and for Roman Catholics, we feel that shared communion is the culmination of our unity and not an expression of the hope for unity.
Okay.
We do not share communion with other denominations. And it's really the understanding that we have about the nature of the communion chalice and the host that gives us that attitude. Now, for example, this form is mainly a Western form. We used leavened bread in our body.
When you say we use?
The Orthodox community.
Okay, and leavened bread would be?
Would be the host comes out of a loaf of bread that is stamped, and out of that stamp comes the lamb that we use for the consecration.
So another sign of difference would be that the unleavened bread would be more of the Western church rather than the Orthodox community.
Exactly, but that difference goes back all the way to the first centuries of Christian history. I think one of the interesting things about the ecumenical movement is that we find that we share so much in common. There had to be some commonalities that we said, okay, let's go back and find what areas in the history of the church we share.
Well, you know, those commonalities, that we really want to lift that up for the viewing audience, but I want to focus on the Eucharist. The month of October was at one time considered to be a time of what we call World Communion Sunday. There's also what we of the Reformation tradition call Reformation Sunday towards the end of October. So there are these kind of church events. But when we talk about World Communion Sunday, we're not so much talking about a shared Eucharist as becoming more aware of the ecumenical nature of the church, that the church is worldwide. And you mentioned your background, Greek Orthodox, you mentioned Roman Catholic, and then you mentioned also the non-Catholic world, if you will, the non-Roman Catholic world. Does the World Council of Churches then involve a broad spectrum of people of different traditions? And then what about the Texas Conference of Churches?
Okay, first of all, the World Council of Churches, the National Council of Churches, and the Texas Conference of Churches are not interrelated. They are parallel, but they are not interrelated as organizations. Going back to the World Council of Churches, it represents churches from Christian churches from India to Ethiopia to Western Europe to the United States, now into China. And so it is a worldwide representative body. The Roman Catholic Church now is involved very strongly as observers, but they observe in practically all of the World Council of Churches events.
And that dialogue is essential, isn't it?
It's absolutely essential. Now, what type of dialogue is it? There are several aspects of the dialogue. One is purely on an academic level. In Lima, Peru, there was a statement about 15 years ago on baptism, Eucharist, and ministries. And then there was about a 10-year study of the statement, and each denomination or each tradition explained how they view baptism, Eucharist, and ministry. So from the statement, there became a way of expressing your faith related to a statement that the church deals with.
Father, it seems to me then what you're saying is that as we talk about the unity of Christianity, we're talking about this over a long length of time. If that statement that came out from Lima, Peru was 15 years ago, then the study of 10 years, you're asking these traditions to spend some thoughtful time.
Absolutely, because the Christian church has been in existence now for well over 2,000 years. Some of the events that caused the church to separate and fragment really took place over a long period of time. So unlike most cultures in the world, the United States is used to the 15-second fix.
Yeah, right.
Okay? Get me my coffee through the McDonald's window instantaneously, or I'm going to be very angry through the rest of my day. Well, it just doesn't work that way. There has to be careful study, there has to be the right approach, and then there's understanding, and then there is after there is that approach, then there has to be a response. This is the way most theological discussions happen.
Well, then maybe what we could say is that we're talking about unity among people of the Christian community. We could say prayer is certainly a basis, but also listening to one another, discussing with one another. Has there not been an effort, though, among some within the Christian community trying to convert their neighbor to their particular expression of the faith?
Actually, that has been a problem, but the understanding among the faith traditions is, I'm not trying to convert you. I'm trying to explain me to you. And in doing that, maybe you understand yourself better.
But I think, and I don't know you well, but I've watched you in public forums, and one of the reasons I wanted you in Austin Faith Dialogue is because I think that you speak well your faith. But it seems to me that one reason you speak well your faith is because you are rooted in your history. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you came from. You're Greek in background, so tell us about your grandparents and parents. I understand Greeks have a good time.
Yes, yes. We enjoy living within a standard of understanding of that there is a boundary. My grandparents were both born in Greece, and my father was born in Greece. But my father immigrated to this country at 14 months old. He would be very much the proverbial infant carried in his mother's arms through Ellis Island.
And they came through Ellis Island?
They came through Ellis Island and went and settled in Chicago. So my father had two older brothers that they basically stayed within their ghetto existence, and I don't mean the ghetto as a
negative term, right.
But it was an ethnic enclave.
Right, a Greek enclave.
Well, it was mixed, Italian, Greek, Polish, so it was a mixed ethnic enclave within the society. Well, my two older uncles stayed and worked in factory work. blue collar. My dad, because of the church, was the first in his family to go on to university and to graduate level studies. Then my uncle followed suit, and he was also a clergyman. My first cousin is a clergyman, and
All within the Greek Orthodox
all,
community?
of course, all within the
course.
Greek Orthodox communion.
But you respond, of course, because that says something that I think is important, that if people are going to talk to one another
Right.
and learn from one another, there has to be that connection with their heritage,
Right.
where they come from.
Yeah.
My thinking is that one of the reasons we have a problem in communicating is that you have such a rich connection with your heritage, but some people don't have that type of thing. So rather than dialoguing and knowing that this is a long-term dialogue, they want to have answers right now.
And to many questions, there are not right now answers. First and foremost, I think people, you use the term grounded, I think people need to look at where they come from and be comfortable with this. And as they are comfortable with this, then they can express that comfort level to another human being or to another tradition.
Well, the image you gave me of your families all being together in that ethnic enclave, you mentioned Italians,
Yeah.
you mentioned Polish, and you mentioned Greeks.
Right.
But there must have been Roman Catholics and Greek Orthodox living in the same neighborhood, but respecting one another. Isn't that a part then of ecumenical dialogue? We pray together, we dialogue, but we have to have respect for one another.
And that's absolutely essential. And there has to be an understanding of each other and their faith traditions. In my mother's experience, the other mix in that entire sphere is the Jewish tradition. There were large numbers of Jewish peoples in her neighborhood. Now, in her neighborhood also was
In her neighborhood in
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Yeah,
Okay.
large numbers of Italians, large numbers of Greeks, large numbers of Jewish people. So there was this understanding, all right, it's the Jewish holidays. Our friends next door or whatever are going to be celebrating that holiday. We have to respect their celebration of that. But within 2 blocks of my mother's home were all of her aunts, all of her uncles, and all of her cousins. So there was that safety net of family.
Do you think the fact that we have many of our people in this country and many within the Christian community who don't have those kinds of roots that you're describing, they're spread out around the country, and does that make it a little more difficult to talk in terms of the ecumenical communication?
I think there's a stability factor for the family there that make it difficult. Now, the ecumenical communication has gone on in spite of that. Of course, it goes on with, I don't want to say professional peoples, but there's also the fact that we have dialogue outside the Christian sphere. In the Texas Conference of Churches for 40 years now, we have had a Jewish Christian dialogue discussing issues that affect both our communities. Recently, we have formed a Muslim Christian dialogue that we discuss issues that now impact both of the communities that we interact with in the state of Texas.
Well, you brought up the Texas Conference of Churches,
Right.
so I want to pursue that. But it's really three levels then: international level, World Council of Churches.
Right.
Then we have the National Council of Churches.
Right.
But here in Texas, we have the Texas Conference of Churches. Maybe give our viewing audience just a little history of going back, because it seems to me that the word, again, vocabulary.
Right.
The vocabulary, council, and conference.
Right.
Originally, it was the Texas Council.
Council of Churches, and that was starting in the time of the 50s and on into the 60s. After Vatican II, again, which is a pivotal time in the world of ecumenical relations.
And let's say that again. That was Pope John the 23rd. It was
Right.
early in the 60s.
In the 60s.
Right.
And Pope John called a worldwide meeting of Catholic bishops, but some of the pronouncements radically changed the approach of the Roman Catholic Church to other Christian and non-Christian communities. And
So it was an exciting time in the 60s.
it was a very exciting time. And the bishops and the lay people of the Roman Church all of a sudden came into this communication with their non-Catholic friends. And so the Texas Council of Churches reformulated itself. And why it did that is, first of all, Roman Catholic community became an active member. Now, for Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholics, the word council has a specific meaning as far as the definition in church language. And we talked earlier about language.
Right.
All right? Well, council to both the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church and the other Orthodox communions has a very specific meaning. So the Texas Council of Churches reformulated itself and took on the name of the Texas Conference of Churches.
And by doing so, then Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox became a part of a dialogue, a prayer time that had been going on for decades before that.
That was primarily a Protestant expression.
I got. What I'm also interested is that not only do we have the vocabulary difficulty sometimes, but we also have the way that we look. And I really appreciate you wearing what you're wearing on Austin Faith Dialogue. But tell our viewing audience a little bit about, is this what a Greek Orthodox priest would wear?
Yeah, if you were in an Orthodox community or an Orthodox country, you would see this type of dress very, very commonly. And most of our clergy walk through the streets dressed like this. They came to the United States in the 1920s and the early 1900s, and they dressed like they dressed with longer beards than I've got. I
Is that something we have to have as a beard? Is
yes,
that
Orthodox clergymen have beards.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. And it comes from the Aaronic things about oil running down the beard of Aaron.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. So
I did not know that. I
Yes.
appreciate you telling me
You
that.
bet.
I don't care for a beard for
yeah,
me, but
well,
I'm glad you have. Looks very
my wife
nice on you.
doesn't care for mine either. And that's another difference between the Greek Orthodox community or the Orthodox community and the Roman Catholics. Our priests are allowed to marry. But in the South especially, this garb was very foreign and evoked a very, very difficult response from people that didn't take the time to find out about the tradition. And priests were attacked and very, very often brutalized. So the clergy at that time took on what was more familiar, the collar and the suit.
And they would attack because they were afraid.
Exactly. It was foreign, so it had to be something that was not something that wasn't un-American.
You have been for 3 years executive director of the Texas Conference of Churches.
Right.
What do you find exciting about that role?
I go statewide. I'm able to interact with faith traditions of all faiths. I also get to talk about the pressing problems of our day, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And what are you going to be offering in November? Now, this program is in October, but you have something coming up in November that would be interesting to many traditions within
Right.
the Christian community and even those outside the Christian community.
We have a program coming in November here in Austin about God's creation and our stewardship of it. And Professor Robert Greenway will be giving the theology of this.
And he's from Austin?
He's from Austin Presbyterian, and then the seminary. And then B. Moorhead, who is a good friend, will be dealing with the politics of the ecology. And then Carol Bedrezik, who's from Texas Rose, will be dealing with our role as consumers and how we impact the
environment.
The
huh?
environment.
And you find that's another place of unity. We talked about prayer, we talked about discussion, vocabulary, we talked about what we wear, we talked about liturgy, worship, but this whole social awareness and concern for the environment, is that drawing all types of people together?
Not only the environment, but also how we treat each other, the difficulties in the society, children's issues, issues of human trafficking, issues of the differing aspects of how we as human beings react to each other. All of those are something that the faith community has something to say.
The faith community and the Texas Conference of Churches can be a conscience for the community?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, you have been a delight to have on the program.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope that we can do this again.
Yeah, I would like to have you back again and talk some more about not only your Greek Orthodox background, but I'd like to hear some good stories about how those Greeks enjoy life.
Well, very good.
And
very good.
Food and celebration is a part of your heritage?
Absolutely.
And good drink?
Fasting first, though.
Okay.
And feasting.
Why do we have to have fasting? How about just feasting?
No. We need the discipline of fasting.
Well, we thank all of you for being with us on Austin Faith Dialogue and for sharing that whole sense of unity that belongs to the people of God. And as we open up ourselves, drawing upon the richness of each one of our heritage, as we share together in this meal, this Holy Eucharist, as you do it in the ritual of your community, as Father George does in the ritual of his Greek Orthodox background, we sense that there is a oneness that belongs to all of us. So thank you, and may God continue to lead the Texas Conference of Churches and lead all of us to share that oneness and that unity that belongs to all of God's people. Blessings to you and to your community. We listen to one another and we pray for one another. Peace be with you. Thanks for being with us.